is Knits and Knots. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make an adult medium-sized pair of mittens. To make these mittens today, you're going to need a 24 peg loom, 2 small skeins or 1 large skein of chunky yarn, an optional color to have color bursts throughout your mitten, and this can be a smaller, thinner yarn, a tapestry needle, a loom hook, and a way to count your rows. Some people have a row counter. I just like to use a pad of paper and a pen. Scissors and 2 hair ties. All right, let's get started. To start your project, you're gonna grab both ends of your yarn and they'll be working together as if they're coming from one ball of yarn the entire project. Make a slip knot and put that slip knot on the outside peg. I only keep the slip knot on the outside peg for the first few rows that I do. I just find that it makes it a little bit easier to manage my project and manage where the yarn is when it's on the first few rows. After the 3rd or 4th row, you can take that slip knot off and tuck it into your work. To start, I'm going to make loops all around the pegs here. The way I make a loop and the way I loom knit is I come from the back, I loop around the front, and I tuck it around the back again. So from the back to the front, and then tuck it around the back again. And I just do this all around the base of the loom, as this will be my first row that I flip over the top, which I'll show you guys in a second. I like to keep my thumb on the last loop that I did just because sometimes you drop your yarn and it'll unravel your whole project. It just takes a little bit more time if that happens. Okay, so we made it all the way around. Next, we're going to loop around the top. And you're gonna try to aim it right for in that little notch right there. That's around the top of your loom. Once you get to the beginning, I like to hold my yarn like this. I mark down my first row and I pick up my loom needle or my loom hook. I flip the first loop that I made over the last loop that I made to secure it on like that. I like to work backwards because the yarn is a little bit looser than if I were to flip over from the front like this. So I work back along my loom like this, and I make sure to grab both strands of yarn up and over. Now that we're at the beginning, I turn it towards me and I just push down all the way around. It's important that when you're using a loom, not to have too much tension, because if it's too tight, it'll make this part of the project really hard and you'll feel like you're really trying to push and you might even break your yarn. So don't do it too loose, but also don't do it too tight. And that's basically going to be our first 15 rows. So you guys do 15 more rows of what I just did and we'll meet back and I'll show you the next step. Now that you have your 15 rows, your project should look something like this. What we're going to do now is we're going to add the hair tie-in so your cuff has an elastic inside of the cuff to make it kind of tighter around your wrist, because sometimes I feel like this can stretch out. Your cuff sometimes stretches out on your mittens and they're just not as comfortable to wear anymore. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our work through the loom like that. And we're gonna grab our hair tie, and it's almost like you're putting your hair in a pony. You're gonna put it all together and you're gonna slip your hair tie right over. And I try to put it somewhere towards the middle And I'm making sure that my tail from where I'm working is draped over and kind of tucked out of the way, because we don't want to have that tucked in our work any other way. We want to make sure that's out of the way. So now we're going to take the loops up here and we're going to loop them onto these pegs right here and secure this hair tie in place. You kind of want to try to follow a seam all the way to the end. So I'm going to pick this peg, the peg where my starting point is, and I'm just going to try to find the loop that goes with that peg. And it doesn't have to be exact, but this looks like it's the loop that's pretty much in line with that peg. So I'm going to loop that over that peg, and I'm just going to continue to find the next loop. And sometimes you have to dig a little bit, but you just always find your next loop and just drape it right over onto that top notch on your peg, keeping the hair tie within your project. Okay, so after you find all of your loops and all of your loops are on this top notch, on these top notches right here, you're just going to continue as normal. So we're not going to count this as a row because we're actually just securing the bottom of your project in, but we're just going to flip the bottom loop over the top loop as normal. This will secure your hair tie in that space that we made, and it'll give your mitten a nice subtle cuff. Okay, now that we're back to the beginning, I flip it and I push everything down. I find my loose string and I basically pick up where I left off. So I wrapped around this peg last, I'm going to go to my next one, wrap it, and I'm going to do 6 more rows like we did the first 15. So I'll do 1 row with you guys, and then we'll pause the video so you can do 6 rows, and then we'll meet back to make the thumb. I mark down my first of my 6, and then I go up and over. So I'll meet you guys back here after we do 6 of these rows. Once you finish your 6 rows, your project should look something like this. We're going to be working on the thumb piece next. And the thumb piece isn't necessarily tricky, but you do have to kind of pay attention and count how many pegs you're on and do a kind of different loop when you're doing your end pegs. You won't be able to finish your thumb piece until after your project is tied off at the top, and I'll show you guys that later. So what we're gonna do is we're on this peg, we're gonna loop around 5 pegs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to hold your project there. I mark down my thumb piece. And you're going to secure that and loop over these 5. Then you're going to push them down and you're going to work back towards the peg. So you're going to loop 1, that's the end peg. So when you do the end peg, you loop around like this, And then you do your normal looping, only you're working backwards. I do my mark. I grab my loom needle. And it's sometimes hard, but you just kind of have to work it over that peg. Once you get over the first peg, the next ones are usually pretty easy. Push them down. And then repeat. So you're going to go around the peg that you're on and then loop the 5. And you just repeat this until you have 26 rows for your thumb. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here once we get 26 rows. So after your 26 rows for your thumb, I actually ended up away from the peg. My last row was like over here. So I actually just did an extra row and came back to my center peg right here. And that's fine. That's not going to mess up your work or anything like that. So don't be afraid to add that extra row to end you back to your starting peg point right here. The next step we're going to do is to make the actual mitt of your glove. So the next thing you have to do is do 18 rows. And that's the same as we did with the cuff and the 6 rows before we started the thumb. So you just go around. And then do your normal loop over. So we're gonna do 18 rows of that, and that will make your mitt. So at this point, I just finished my 18th row, and as you can see, it's really starting to take its shape. So you can even kind of try it on if you want. You can see the thumb part still needs to be done, and we still need to close off the top. But before we take this project off the loom, I like to do a little trick to keep my elastic at the bottom of my cuff. Sometimes if you don't secure it at the bottom of your cuff, your elastic will roll up to the top, and some people don't really care about that, but if you're somebody like me who really wants to keep the elastic at the bottom of the cuff, you can follow along and I'll show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the tail. I leave a little bit because we still have to weave in the top part of our mitten, but we'll leave that much. And then I'm just going to take some of my yellow yarn, and I'll cut about a little over a foot. Oh, hi Kirby. And what we're going to do is we're going to find the elastic. Excuse my cat, I'm sorry. Curbs, move. And we're going to find where the elastic is on the bottom of our cuff. So I picked a green elastic, so hopefully you guys could see it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to, but so there's the green elastic. I'm going to make sure it's at the bottom. I'm going to make sure all of it's rolled to the bottom of my cuff so I can feel it all the way around right here. And I'm basically going to pick 4 points. I'm going to pick this point, this point, this point, and this point to secure that elastic. So here's my green elastic, if you guys can see it, it's right there. I'm going to put my needle in underneath that green elastic, and I'm going to secure it to just one of the loops. So I'm going to pick this loop right here. Can you see that it's under the green elastic and under one of my bottom loops of my mitten? I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm just going to tie it, just do a double knot. 1, 2. And then I cut it fairly close, careful not to cut the mitten, and you can't even tell that that knot is there. But it's securing your elastic there. And that just ties it to the bottom stitches, and your elastic won't roll up to the top of your cuff. So then your mitten will always be tight towards the bottom of your cuff. Just kind of stretch it out. Make sure it feels good. And that's that. Our next step is going to be weaving out these loops up top. And how we're going to do that is we're going to take this tail that we had, we're going to thread our needle, and we're simply going to follow what we've normally been doing. So we're at this loop right here, so we're going to go to the next loop, and we're just going to weave the needle up and under and pull your string through. And you're going to do that all the way around. Your needle up and under, pull all the way through. Sometimes it helps that if you get a few strands in, you can kind of just take those off, the ones that you've already weaved through, because sometimes it gets kind of tight to work through your other loops. So we're gonna weave in. I usually do 3 to 5, and then I'll take them off, and then do 3 to 5, and then take those loops off. And then just kind of as I go, I just take off the loops. So I'm going to let you guys work around your loom until all of your loops are off of the loom, and I'll meet you guys back here. Okay guys, so I just went through my last loop, so I'm going to take that off the loom, and we're done with the loom for this project. So you can kind of set that aside. And now you've got a string looped through all of your top loops. So what you're going to do is you're going to bunch that up, and you're going to reach in from the bottom of your mitten and just kind of grab it and gently turn it inside out. And get your thumb inside out too, because we're going to be working on that here soon. So it's inside out. I'm going to send my needle through to the end and grab it. Okay. So it's inside out, and all you should be able to have to do is just kind of gently tug and pull this. Don't pull it too tight where your yarn breaks, but you want to make sure that it's tight so it's closed at the top. And all you're going to do is you're going to kind of find a stitch close to where your string is and go into a stitch that's next to it. And just work your tail through a couple stitches before you tie off, just to make sure you have a little bit of leeway in case, you know, stitches come loose or you need that extra little bit of tail. So I just kind of do a little circle around the top, make sure I really secure that in there. And there's lots of ways you can tie off your knot, but I like to do it this way. It just seems like it's the most secure way. So I take my needle and I pull it through, and I take my needle off, and I basically make 2 knots. So I have the loop right here, and I have one end of the loop and another end of the loop, and I have my tail right here. I basically just tie my tail to both bases of that loop. So there's my double knot for that base. And then I do it over here as well for this base of my loop. And I just tie my loop like this. And then you just snip off, not too close to the knots, but close enough where you're not leaving too many tails. Snip off the extra, and there's that. So I'll let you guys work your knots, and I'll meet you back here to put the finishing touches on our thumb. Okay guys, we're almost done with this mitten. So what's left to do is to weave in our Slipknot tail and to also sew in our sides to our thumb. So we'll start off with weaving in our Slipknot tail. This is basically the same thing as you did when you weaved in this top part here. And like I said, you can tie it in any way you want to. This is just how I like to do it. I just feel like it's extra secure. Again, cut those extra strings off, not too close. It's okay if it leaves a little bit of tail in the inside of your glove because nobody's gonna see it. Okay, so next we're going to sew in the sides of our mitten here. So what you're gonna need to do is grab your yellow string, and I usually just do probably about like 2 feet, I guess, of string. And that should be enough to weave in your whole thumb on both sides. So again, I shape my thumb like this, kind of match up the sides, and I start off right where that hole is. And I go through, I tie that bottom. The inside doesn't have to look pretty because obviously nobody's really going to be seeing the inside of your glove or your mitten. So then you basically just weave through. So there's that. I'm gonna do my tie off. Snip my ends. And then turn my glove or my mitten. Oops, I forgot to snip this end. Then turn my mitten, right side facing out. And then you have a pair of mittens. Put them on for you guys. Thank you for watching, and if you liked this craft and your mittens turned out awesome, make sure you hit subscribe and share this video so your friends can make them too. Hopefully I'll see you guys next time for our next craft.